Hey guys, welcome to this video. So today we're going to be talking about when to use full range compression in orchestral music. So there are many people who say you shouldn't compress orchestral instruments, and that's actually true for the most part in my opinion, except multiband compression and dynamic EQ. As you could see in the previous video, I like to use that to kind of control resonances in orchestral instruments. But full range compression, not really, but there are a few exceptions, and in this video we're going to go over these exceptions. But first, let's try to understand why orchestral instruments generally don't need that much compression. Well, the thing is, it's mostly basically managed by the articulations. So when you tell a group of players to play mezzo forte, you might have like 12 violins, for example. You have this player will be a bit quieter than maybe this player, and this player will be the loudest. But basically, all these violins, these 12 violins, if you tell them to play the same dynamic, they will kind of average out around a certain level. So for that reason, for ensemble instruments, it usually sounds the best to just kind of leave the natural sound and maybe just control resonances and ugly, maybe natural resonances with a dynamic EQ or multiband compressor, but don't use full range compression because it would be overkill for most ensemble instruments. But now compression can still be used in orchestral music, and that is with percussion, percussion ensembles, and solo instruments. If you just have one player, then you can hear all the inconsistencies of that player. And basically there is a lot more jumpiness in the performance. So you can see a solo violin here. Yeah, if you had an ensemble violin, then the waveform of the ensemble violins wouldn't be like that. It would be kind of averaging out. You wouldn't have these huge dynamics because, as I said, if you have several players, they're kind of compensating for each other. But when it comes to solo performances, you have all the little dynamics of the player, so there is a lot more dynamic range and dynamic variation. And in that case, compression will be useful, and I will show that in a bit. Now for drums, compression can be useful because it can help us shape the impacts. Now in many cases, people just throw a compressor on drums because that's what they read online, and it actually sounds worse. It's very easy to make something sound worse with compressors. So let's figure out actually how they can affect our drum sounds. So the first thing is compressors, they will basically detect the signal when it goes over a limit and then reduce the volume and then release again. So if we put a compressor on this sound, for example, it can help us make the drums hit a bit harder because the thing is, we can actually set the attack so that we get the snap, so 30 milliseconds here. So we get the initial snap, and then it compresses the what comes right after the attack and releases. So it makes it sound like there is more of a snap because we let the snap through, and then boom, it dips. So it kind of exaggerates the attack, if that makes sense. So the drum sound by default would be like that. And by using compression, we kind of did all of the snap, so like that, and then whoa, we make it dip, compress, and then it releases. So we make that part more prominent, and we also raise the release here. So we have more of that kind of room noise because the release kind of bring up the tail of the drum and also emphasizes the attack. So if you want to make a drum hit harder with compression, do not set the attack too short. If you set the attack too short, you will just flatten everything. Just bring up the tails and flatten the attack. If you leave enough attack, you will excite the attack by leaving that transient, and then you will also release the tail, let the tail go up. So in a way, it will make the drum more exciting. It will make the drum more like something like this in terms of the waveform shape. So that will sound fatter in the tail and more snappier at the same time compared to that other black one. Now, is this always good? Do you always need more punch, more click, and do you always need to bring up the tails? No, not always. In that case, it's kind of up to the sound you want, basically. This sound is good without a compressor, but it's also good with the compressor. So check it out. Without the compressor. With the compressor. Yeah, you can hear the whooshiness of the tails that comes up. But at the same time, the sound is still tighter without the compressor in a way. Like you get more of that stubbiness. It's less kind of slurred. So if you wanted a quick defined drum, you wouldn't compress it at all. If you wanted a bit more of a scratch sound, a bit more of a sound that kind of brings up the room noise and just fills the space more, then yeah, you might want to compress it a bit. So then we have another sound here. So it's a drum sound that's a little bit flat and MIDI feeling by default. So again, we want to kind of enhance the attack to make it feel like it's being hit harder, and also it's more defined. But now we have to be very careful with the settings as usual. So if we just put a compressor with too short of an attack time, this is what happens. It just feels squashed and not defined at all. So that's not what we want. So we want a compression that's long enough of an attack to make the sound really more defined, like this. So now we can feel like every hit is being enhanced a bit. Compared to... yeah, this one is just cutting the attacks. And this one is helping the attacks. Now, as you can see, the difference here is mostly that there is 30 milliseconds of attack here, and there is 0 milliseconds of attack. But now, when a sound is pretty noisy and not very defined like that and quite rumbly, sometimes the compressor can't really detect the transients well. So in that case, it can't really compress as well. So there is a limit to how much punch we can get from this with a normal compressor, in which case you might want to check my other video, punch with sidechain multiband compression. And stuff like that can help actually redefining these drums in a better way than just a normal compressor. But normal compressors can still help and get more punch out of these sounds. Now, in some cases, you don't want to enhance the attack at all because a drum already has enough, and that's usually for high-pitched drums or just high drums in general, shakers, stuff that's really high. So, for example, this sound here could actually benefit from limiting because by default, these transients are just a little bit too snappy, and it's actually kind of hurting the ears and preventing us from turning up the sound. And basically, if we play that through a mix, the attacks would just pop too much, and all the meat of the sound would be kind of too low in volume compared to the very attacks. So if you just focus on that middle part here, I will play with and without a limiter. And you will see that with the limiter, it's just more controlled. We can kind of turn it up more, make it loud. I recommend you make your sound louder in this video, but you will be able to make it louder and it will be more comfortable to listen to and just feel more balanced. See here around this part here, like we don't really need these super harsh transients, and we can get a fuller, kind of more balanced sounding sound by cutting these transients. So it's kind of the opposite that what we did before. In that case, too much attack, so we cut it. In that case of that previous sound, not enough attack, needs more punch. In that case of this other sound, both are fine, but we can get a bit of a harder sound with compression, so it's really up to you. So here the solo violin performance, I will play it with and without a compressor through the noise. And the noise is kind of simulating a string pad or anything you could have behind this performance. And it's just going to kind of simulate frequency masking, just masking the violin. And it will be a good kind of way to hear what the compression is actually doing to the violin. So that's my background music. And now let's play the violin with and without the compressor. So let's start with without and then with and see how it affects the performance. right? It just feels better with the compression. So why? Because all these bits here, all these quieter bits of articulation, they just come up because these peaks get brought down. So in that case, compression really helps with the emotion of the violin, because if we didn't compress, then these peaks would be what mostly pokes out and the stuff here would be buried. So it would be like, wah, wah, wah. But with compression, it's a lot more lyrical feeling. So pay attention. See how it feels actually more slurred, more like da, 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 instead of wah, wah, wah. And that's because thanks to compression, we reduce these peaks and we hear more of everything. So of course we hear more of the legato, more of everything else. So yeah, maybe by itself the violin would sound fine, but with the background music, with other sounds in the background, simulated by this noise here, it could be anything. It could be a string bed, pads, synth. Yeah, basically that kind of masks the quieter bits, and as you can see, it dramatically affects the performance. So using compression on overly dynamic sounds like that just brings up the performance together and allows us to get a actually, yeah, more emotional and well represented instrument. So as I said, yeah, ensemble instruments don't really need that because they're already flatter to begin with and they don't have all these micro dynamics to take care of, which is why you generally wouldn't want to compress them. But as you can see, we get a lot out of this with compression. So yeah, hopefully guys that helped you understand when to use full range compression in orchestral music. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments and yeah, I will see you in another video guys. Bye!